What is your official status with the HAS?
I am out bad. Out bad, no contact. You also have to understand, it's kind of become the new norm in the outlaw bike world. You know, you leave the club, you're out bad. People that don't believe me, ask around. I don't know any other way to describe it. I never thought that it would happen to me. I've watched it happen to several members over the years, but it was for testifying against people, stealing from people. I didn't do anything like that. I never testified against anybody, never put anybody in jail, never debriefed with the cops, never went to a grand jury, except with the exception of one time, and I took the fifth the whole time. This is George Christie, and you're watching me on Cinemills TV.
We have George Christie, a.k.a. Dirty George. Thank you for coming through today.
Well, I haven't heard Dirty George in a long time, so you must have dug that up.
Well,
You've been doing your homework, huh?
I heard your friends called you Gus.
That's true.
You were a former president of one of the most notorious one-percenter biker clubs, the Hells Angels. And you're a former U.S. Marine. Is there a direct correlation with guys returning from combat that find what they're looking for in one-percenter clubs?
Well, I never was in combat as a Marine. I have a stage play I do, and I talk about I never went to war as a Marine. I went to war here in Southern California as a Hells Angel, and I think that it really gave me a lot of discipline, a lot of focus. The military, especially the Marines, it's very extensive. I joined in 1965, left in 1966, and, was in it almost maybe close to 6 years. And I got in trouble, got court-martialed, and I was given an alternative route, I guess you could say. I went to work for the Department of Defense, and I worked for the Department of Defense with the top security clearance till 1978, and they found out that I was a leader of the Los Angeles Hells Angels. They threatened to take my security clearance away. So I think the discipline in the military and the discipline, working for the government helped me as a leader, helped me as as a Hells Angel in general. But, what you have to understand is the whole outlaw movement started after World War II, from returning veterans from, the Pacific theater and the European theater. So I think it has its roots with the military. I think there's structure. People at times go, well, George, man, you're supposed to be an outlaw. You got all this structure in the outlaw bike clubs. So, maybe it's, contradictory, but, I got my discipline from the Marines.
Right. And you mentioned your leadership style is you would lead from the front, which is unique. You wouldn't ask anyone to go on a mission. You wouldn't go on yourself, correct?
That's absolutely correct. I mean, I was there on the front lines. I think it got me the respect of not only my people, but I think it got me the respect of other clubs. When I go in to negotiate, I did a lot of negotiating with these other bike clubs. That was my goal. I went into prison in 1968. I joined the club in 76. 10 years later, I find myself set up by the FBI. I'm in Terminal Island Prison. When I got down there was a gentleman there, Hells Angel leader, very powerful leader from San Diego, Guy Castiglione. And I said to Guy, who do we got a problem with in here? What do I need to look out for? And Guy laughed, and he goes, what are you talking about? I go, who do we have a problem with? He goes, we don't fight in prison. And I said to him, you mean to tell me we We don't fight in prison? And he goes, no. So it seemed odd to me that we could get along in prison, but we couldn't get along in the streets. Now we're on the streets. We got our bikes, our women, our club, our good times, and we're fighting with each other. And I kind of went on a quest when I returned in 1987 after I beat the case. I took the case to trial, beat it, which is, very difficult. 98% conviction rate with the feds, even higher now perhaps. But I went on this quest, and I started talking to all these different bike clubs, trying to open up lines of communication and to try to put our conflicts behind us. In fact, my posture and position probably saved me from going to prison. When Sonny got busted by Tony Tate, the informant from Alaska, the Hells Angel informant, it was all about blowing up the outlaws. Tony Tate, at the behest of the FBI, came to me, wanted permission to blow up the outlaws, which no longer was my agenda or my interest. One of the other things that raised a red flag with me is, we're at war with the outlaws. Why would you come to me and ask permission to go do something? It seemed very odd. My red flags went up. When he didn't get anywhere with me, the FBI immediately sent him over to Sonny's house. And so you've got one conversation, two different outcomes. I tell him no. I continue with my tenure as leader and member of the Hells Angels. Sonny goes to federal prison for 5 years.
Right. And Sonny unfortunately bit down on that hook. But, when you speak of the outlaws, the pagans, Sons of Silence, the Mongols, who would you say, Banditos, who would you say ranked as the biggest rival of the HA, or was it a regional thing?
I'm going to say initially it was the outlaws. You've got a couple of, you have to go back. You've got to go back to Sandy Alexander is leader of the Hells Angels on 3rd Street. A former member of the club that Sandy and him were both in before Sandy became a Hells Angel was called the Aliens. Grease Lightning is now a vocal and powerful outlaw. They're still friends. Grease Lightning comes to town to visit Sandy. Sandy's gone with the 3rd Street crew. I don't know where they were. Sandy's wife invites him in because they're all friends. The story goes, and her allegation was that Grease Lightning raped her. Colette tells Sandy, hey, this is what happened. Sandy immediately goes hunting for him, finds him, beats the shit out of him. Surprised he didn't kill him, but he didn't. Beats the shit out of him. Grease Lightning goes back to the outlaws and said the whole New York charter jumped me, and they're lying. A couple of Hells Angels go to Florida to hunt down an ex-Hells Angel that they want to cover his tattoo because he's selling drugs down there in Florida. And the outlaws are complaining about it, and they go down there, they find the guy, they cover his tattoo. They get an invite to come to the clubhouse, the outlaw clubhouse. Now, they weren't aware of how severe Sandy beat this Grease Lightning up. They go to the clubhouse. I think Jim Nolan wound up going to prison for those 2 murders. It was a double murder. They shot these 2 Hells Angels, threw them in a quarry, weighted them down with chains and whatnot. And ultimately, one of them, ironically, his nickname was Riverboat, floated to the top, and that's how the war started with the outlaws. So there's a lot of bitter feelings, and I felt that the war initially with the outlaws was much more hate going on than even when we started with the Mongols. The Mongols, problem was over hurt feelings. These guys putting California Rocker on, them taking in a former Hells Angel that had ratted on some people. The circumstances were a little bit different between the outlaws and the war with the Mongols, but they wound up both being just as fierce.
What I always admired about the HA is their structure. Every chapter had its own president. There wasn't a top-down hierarchy structure. This is what little Dave had to say about the HA.
So we had a really good relationship and it was working. But the problem with the HAs, their individual charters are ran independently of its own.
Let me let my audience know that some clubs have a central leadership, right?
Pyramid structure.
A pyramid structure. Other clubs have, each chapter has their own president and can make their own call.
Exactly.
And so you had no real, there was no one to liaison with.
Exactly.
You'd have to piece up with these individual chapters, basically.
And that's what the public doesn't know.
They don't know that.
But the problem with dealing with the HAs is that they like to shift blame. Oh, it wasn't Ventura, it was Riverside chapter. Or it wasn't Arizona, it was
those
Colorado.
guys, yeah. But it's also smart of the HA where they can't
be
prove
RICO'd.
RICO'd. Yeah, right.
Exactly.
What do you think about what little Dave said regarding the ability for the government to put a RICO case on the Mongols because they have a top-down structure versus the Hells Angels method of having different presidents for each charter?
Well, I think the 1979-80 racketeering case, it was adjudicated, and the best they could do was hung juries twice. So what little Dave's saying has a lot of substance to it, and I agree with him. I think that that saved our ass, and I think it created a lot of problems for the Mongols. I think Dave held the title of international leader at one point. That's a big target on your back. And, here's another example. Taco was an international leader. Taco dies in prison in 2019 when I was in Spain. He goes to prison for racketeering. Bandito leader Jeff Pike, he's in prison for life.
Right. Yeah.
International leader, he's in prison for racketeering. So that title is a dangerous title to have, and I think the autonomy of having individual charters that only answer to themselves has saved us. The interesting thing is the police don't believe that's the way it's really structured. They thought Sonny was in charge. They thought I was the number two guy. They felt Sonny was giving the orders and I was doing the daily operations, keeping the club running. And, that wasn't the case, but it may have appeared to be that way because, Sonny had stepped away from being vocal. I was in the news all the time. I was doing all the interviews. It brings, that kind of stuff brings a lot of heat in itself, just as a title does. You get these guys in the Outlaws, the Banditos, the Mongols, and the Hells Angels as well. They start debriefing. Well, do you have an international leader? Well, Hells Angels can't officially say they have an international leader, but a Mongol goes, yeah, it's Little Davy. Outlaw, yeah, it's Taco. Yeah, it's Jeff Pike, from the Banditos. So it has its benefits because I used to go to these meetings. I was sent there at behest of the Hells Angels, but I'd have to go to these meetings and I would have to bring back the resolution to the general body of the Hells Angels to vote on. So the bureaucracy was just overwhelming. You're sitting in there with George Weggers or Taco, whoever it may be, and they go, okay, how's this sound, George? And I go, yeah, I think that's something we can live with. Okay, let's make it a rule. Well, guys, I got to take it back to my crew. So you're talking about a 90-day delay, and these guys would get frustrated. And I think it benefited them to have the ability to say yes or no, but it compromised me in my negotiations because I couldn't just make an agreement on the spot.
You actually went on a really strong PR campaign to change the narrative of the HA. In 1984, you ran the Olympic torch.
Right.
You did a lot of donations. You became a legend in Ventura, and almost seen as a father figure to many.
Well, it's interesting. In the early 80s, we created a trademark board, and I sat on that trademark board with a lot of members. Irish was one of them as well. And our lawyers were Limbach, and Sutton. And these guys are top-notch lawyers. They represented Levi Strauss, Coca-Cola, MasterCard, I believe Pepsi-Cola, and they represented the Hells Angels. And they taught me about branding, how to control your brand, what you do with the brand, what you don't do with the brand. And the biggest thing they taught me was controlling the narrative. You have to control the narrative. If you can control the narrative, then you can reach the public and you can create the vision or the image that you want to sell to the public. And I don't mean that in a disrespectful way, sell, because these are people, and this is something I could take verbatim from an officers' meeting. I would tell people, we've got to control the narrative because the people out there that we're trying to reach are the people that comprise the juries that will be judging us for our crimes that we really do, or worse yet, the crimes that they imagine or create and tell the public that we're doing. So, that was part of my reasoning, and I have to attribute, Mr. Sutton to that. We had some conversations. Ultimately, they cut us loose. Coca-Cola and the other strong brands found out that they were representing us as well. And they wanted to control their own narrative, and their narrative wasn't that they wanted the same lawyers that the Hells Angels had.
Right. With your public persona, were there some hardcore fellas in the HA that were like, man, I don't like George being out there like that. We're supposed to be outlaws. And did you get a lot of pushback from some of the hardcore dudes inside the organization?
I did. I got a phone call one night from somebody that I thought I was very close with. This is when I said, look, the feds are saying we're going to disrupt the Olympics. We got to get out in front of it. We got to support the Olympics. And, I talked the club into allowing me to carry the torch and the torch relay. Got a terrific publicity. But I got a phone call from a distressed member one night. I'm not going to even say his name, but, he hurt my feelings. He goes, you're ruining us, man. He goes, we're outlaws. We don't give a fuck what society thinks. And I said, we need to start. We need to start.
You were very progressive in that thinking. Some guys hate it. Other guys don't want to be put in a headlock with law enforcement. You mentioned, and you're on record for saying that when you were the president of the Ventura chapter, you actually had a direct line to the chief of police there.
Well, the chief of police started on the street in Ventura. You have to understand, Ventura was a very, very small town initially. I would say I knew every cop that patrolled the streets of Ventura at one time. And these 30 years later, chief of police, him and I became good friends. He used to come by the clubhouse. And you know what? I got a lot of flack from a lot of people. You're too close to the cops. What are you telling the cops? Well, I've never told the cops anything that got anybody in trouble. Did I negotiate with the cops? Yeah, hey, back off. You guys were going to take you to court. Things of that nature. And, he basically, and I'm not going to mention his name, he's a very private guy. He basically said, you run the streets, don't impact the community, and everything will be fine. And that's the position we took and position we held for years.
Right, and you guys were also noted for actually mediating street beefs with the Ventura Avenue gangsters, the Pierpont Skins, all the different factions up there.
You've been doing your homework, huh?
Well,
it's absolute fact. And, the first drive-by shooting happened in Ventura, and I'm going to say it was in the 90s. That's when we were having that phenomena here in Southern California, violence on violence to kids, shooting other kids. And there was a drive-by shooting. Then there was another one. Nobody got wounded. And we called a meeting at the clubhouse, and I sent Tiny out.
And just for our audience to know, Tiny is not tiny.
No, he's not tiny.
He's a huge man.
So I sent Tiny out, and I say, round these guys up. Tell them they got to come down here. Don't tell them, don't give them a choice. Tell them they got to come down here. And all the street gangs came down. There was probably 7 different factions, And we basically put a moratorium on drive-by shootings. And, the thing is, and, perhaps it was cavalier and morally incorrect on my part, I basically told them, you guys want to go out of city limits and shoot at each other, knock yourselves out. You're not going to do it within the community here. And I said, if you do, you're going to have to answer to us. And, it stopped. And ultimately, we started throwing big parties, and all the street gangs would come to the parties. And there was a moratorium on anybody that had a problem with somebody. You couldn't bring it into the clubhouse area. And, there was some of the cops that were sergeants and corporals at the time who later became the upper echelon of the police that I didn't get along with. They were very angry because we were making like $25,000 in a party with these parties. We were selling admission, we were selling alcohol, we were selling support gear, we were selling food. We were knocking it dead. And I actually had someone that became the chief of police just before I left the club. He said one time, he goes, well, what's our cut? What do we get?
Right.
And I go, get anything, man.
George, what's funny is you've always been an entrepreneur. You've had a concert promotion business. You had a motorcycle shop at one point. Did you own Snookies? Is that rumor true?
No, that was not true. But we used to help the guys keep the order in there and keep the peace. I'll tell you, there was a couple of places. Me personally, I had the tattoo shop, I had the T-shirt company, I had the concert promotion business, I had a bail bonds company. I was, and this really burned the cops, but I was administrator for my daughter's law office, and there was some adult entertainment places that we made sure people behaved themselves in there. Did I have a piece of the action? No, but the police thought I did, and I know at one time they approached me. There was a gentleman's club, a guy that owned the Spearmint Rhino, and he got busted. He was going to jail, and I know they were feds. They came to me and they wanted to strong arm the guy as he was leaving for prison and take over all the Spearmint Rhinos in Southern California. And, I kind of looked at him and I said, I talked to my daughter about this, and I said, I think it would be more appropriate to make him an offer now that he's leaving for prison. I said, we don't have to take it over. We can buy it, and then we don't have anything to worry about. And, I never heard from the guys again. They never showed up again. And they didn't take over the Spearmint Rhinos. They were cops.
In the early kind of development years of the HA, you would see guys wearing Swazis and SS bolts. What was your policy on the Swazi and the SS bolts? Did you feel that was inappropriate?
First of all, you have to understand, the guys coming back from the European theater had conquered the Nazi regime, and they were bringing that stuff back. And if you study your history, you realize any army that conquers another army, whether it was in the Roman era, the Greek, Alexander the Great era, or the Civil War, or whenever, you conquer an army, you take their things. It's spoils of war. And the guys came back. They had all this Nazi regalia. There was also some Japanese regalia. My dad, was a CB. He brought back a bunch of Japanese regalia. It wasn't as popular as the German regalia for whatever reason. So the Nazi swastikas, the SS bolts, those were all spoils of war. They weren't that people supported that, but I'll tell you how it all ended. In the mid-'90s, in Germany, the club started getting big over there. And I don't know if you realize it, and I don't know how far your show goes out, but you're not allowed to use the Nazi salute. You get caught doing that in Germany, you go to jail. Now, we decided as a club in the 90s to outlaw all Nazi stuff. And a lot of the guys had SS bolts on their tanks and whatnot. Everything had to get painted. They had to take everything down, get their bikes painted by a particular point in time, take any Nazi regalia off their jackets. And we did this to help out our German brothers.
A lot of women's groups have a problem with the ladies of these bikers wearing property of Dirty George. What are your thoughts? Is it more of an honor to those women, or can you explain that?
I've never had a woman associated with me that, wore that type of identification, but you've seen it through the years. It's not as popular in the Hells Angels you don't see it, really don't see it at all anymore. It is with the other clubs. I just did a program, I talked to you about it earlier, and they did a big segment on, Hell's Angels abusing women. My challenge to them is, and when I say them, the people that are coming up with this posture that, we're women beaters and misogynistic, what is the percentage of Hell's Angels that have been arrested or even convicted of spousal abuse? I don't think there's anything out there. It's like people call the Hell's Angels rapists. Where's the statistics? Sonny Barger and his wife Noelle had a problem. People have problems. I'm just not built like that. Never saw my father strike my mother. I think that people will continue to make these allegations. I think it's good press for people. I just did an interview for the A&E station with a woman up in Portland, and I had this very conversation with her. She didn't want to talk about it. When I said, let's bring out the statistics and let's find out what the record reads like. And I bet you the police, and this isn't, I got a lot of cop friends, this isn't about trying to make the police look bad. This is about defending the outlaw bike culture. If you were to look up the police statistics, I bet there's a lot more spousal abuse in law enforcement than there ever was in the outlaw bike community.
What I've been told by some one percenters is when you see a woman wearing property of, neck bone or whatever, it's more of a way to let the other bikers know, hey, this is my old lady, proceed accordingly, so they don't accidentally hit on that girl thinking she, at a club.
I agree with you on that 100%, and I'll give you a real obscure, analogy. It's just like a woman wearing a headscarf. They wear the headscarf because it's part of the religion, and you could say it's part of the culture. And you're absolutely right. They wear that as a warning. Hey, this woman's with me. Don't mess with her. You could argue about this all day long, but I think that you have to respect individuals, couples, how they make their relationship work. Who am I to interfere in a couple? I told a story a couple of weeks ago on my podcast that I interceded one time. I tried to help a woman was getting beat by a guy, and people goes, who's going to stop him? And I jumped up and I went over there. What happens in the end? I'm really having to do some damage to this guy to control him. The woman turns on me, and ultimately the crowd turns on me. He's had enough. And I addressed the crowd. I said, I'll tell you when he's had enough. Because I was having a rough time. I wasn't about to let this guy up. I figured he'd kick the shit out of me.
What I noticed about you is you never speak bad about the HA. You always praise them. You always put them in the best light possible. Even when you had your beef with Sonny Barger, I've never heard you throw Sonny through the mud. I mean, you've talked about him here and there.
Let me interject something. Anything I have ever said about Sonny, I've said to his face. The last time Sonny and I talked was in the back of the Oakland clubhouse. I confronted him about his behavior, some of the things he was doing. I confronted him man to man, face to face. Papa, who was a powerful Hell's Angel from San Francisco, later was killed by a Mongol. He was the kind of chairperson. He hosted that sit down. And so the things I say about Sonny, I did say to his face. People write sometimes on social media, you wouldn't be saying this if Sonny was alive. Well, yeah, I would. I did say it when Sonny was alive. I didn't mean any disrespect then. I don't mean any disrespect now. Sonny had different leadership ideas than me. Unfortunately, we couldn't resolve our problems. And I do support the outlaw lifestyle. I talk good about all bike clubs. If I have a negative experience with them, I'll share that as well. But I haven't had any negative experiences. My daughter's a criminal lawyer, and I'm not going to put him on Front Street, but she asks me, anytime she's going to represent a Hells Angel, she always asks me out of respect for me. And, there's a lot of Hells Angels out there that don't believe the things that people had said that I did or didn't do. But, you know, they're all one club. They're brothers. They support each other. And I'm not asking anybody to go to bat for me. You know, I've been in this position for a while now, and it doesn't slow me down. I don't hide. I make myself available, visible. And you're right, you know, I do stand up to the Hells Angels. I just did a show for A&E, and a lot of the things I said, they cut out because they thought somehow, because I was no longer in the club, I would slam them. And, you know, the biggest thing I say is the Hells Angels, along with all the other bike clubs, are not criminal organizations. They're organizations that have criminals in them, just like law enforcement, politicians, doctors, lawyers. You know, it's just, you know, part of life.
Give the average Joe civilian some advice when he's at a bar, he's drinking, and a whole bunch of HA roll in. How should he conduct himself when the fellas come into that bar?
Go off in your own corner. If you think that buying a Hells Angel is permission to think you're bros with them, it doesn't happen that way. And usually what happens is people have a couple of drinks, they buy you some drinks, you drink down a couple of shots with them, they start sizing you up. They see you interacting with your brothers in a loving, respectful way, and they may even see you and another brother kind of jawing with each other and razzing each other, and they somehow think that they can join in the fun. And, you know, you get these guys that start saying stupid things, and the next thing you know, that, you know, they're on their ass looking up at you, and the first thing they do is they go call 911. Give them their space. If you want to buy them a drink, send it over to them. Don't go there yourself. They don't want to see you, man.
Okay. Keep to yourself, basically.
Yeah, let the one percenters, if they want to interact with you, they'll come over and talk to you. Maybe they'll come over and want to steal your girl. Be careful.
And now you're in a headlock. Yeah. George, we want to thank you so much for coming through. How can our audience do you interact with people?
Well, I'm on Instagram. I'm on Facebook. Those are my two biggest platforms. I have a podcast, Speak of the Devil. It's a subscription podcast. If I have a Q&A every week, I do. You write in your questions, and you know, I'll answer your questions. I tell little stories, you know, off the questions. Sometimes I comment on things that are happening in the motorcycle world. But you know, if you get on my social media and talk shit to me, I'm going to talk shit back to you.
Right.
And I'm going to talk about your mom, because I probably took her out at one time or another.
Oh, man. Hey, George, where can we get your book?
My books are on Amazon, or you can go to georgechristie.com. I have my books that I sign and send to people. That'll also take you to my podcast.
Beautiful. George, keep riding, man.
All right, man.